No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, before we get into the topic for today's episode, I want to thank our listeners real quick here because as of right now, we are the #1 leadership podcast on Podbean, our host, and the #2 leadership podcast on all of iTunes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's tremendous, and it's because of all of you listeners. Thank you so much for sharing the episodes, with friends and family and people that you think bring value to it. And it's been really cool as well to kind of see us pop up in the What's Hot on iTunes as well, right along with some great company like Gary Vee and the MFCEO Project and the Ziegler Show and all that type of fun stuff. So thank you so much to everybody.
Yeah, 100% agree. For tonight's topic, I want to talk a little bit about influence. And what happened was I was washing dishes. It was a lot of dishes for a get-together that we had over at our house. And, more dishes than a normal evening, some pans and bowls and pots, some bigger dishes that we normally would not get out or use. And, my wife actually cooked all of it. And so I told her I would clean up afterwards. Mm-hmm. And so it's a good compromise we always have. If she cooks something, then I clean it up. And so I jumped in after all the guests left to start cleaning it up. And she started telling me the best order to wash the dishes. And I stopped and I turned the water off and I said, you can either tell me to do the dishes or you can tell me how you will do the dishes. but you can't tell me how I will do the dishes. Yeah. And it was an overly prideful moment because her way was actually better. Yeah. But I couldn't let her know that. So I proceeded to do it my way, and she understood that she wasn't going to be doing it. I'm doing it. So she went and watched a little TV while I did the dishes. And so it got me thinking about the concept of influence in meeting people where they are. And one of the things that it's as simple as somebody asking me to do something for them and then also proceeding to tell me how they want it done. And in some circumstances, there's no way around it. If you don't know how to do something, then you might want their counsel on it. But when it comes to something that can have multiple ways of getting that job done, it can be a dance between turning the person off and actually getting the job done, or maybe they do it and they do it in a way that you wouldn't have done it. I know how do you do this when it comes to influencing people and making sure that the job gets done, but that you don't come off as like you're micromanaging or you're telling them how to get there?
Sure, absolutely. I will tell you where I see that, as a thing that I deal with constantly. I was actually just having some dialogue with another leader the other day about this. Is when you're in a role like an elevated role, like a store leader or general manager, and you've got peers that you work with, in markets or districts or regions or whatever the case may be. What ends up happening is you get a collection of people that are, relatively confident in their way of doing things. You could call that stubborn, or you could just call that confident in their capabilities.
Well, they might each have many years of experience brought to the table.
Absolutely, and more than likely, the reason why they're at the table is that they've actually found success in the way they do things.
Right.
So that ends up happening where you now have to work together towards a common goal or strategy, or it's, hey, not just what am I doing, but what are we collectively doing to get the output that we're looking for. And so when you think about influence and meeting people where they're at, it really is one of those things where you can either attempt to make everybody, to your point, do it the way you would do it, and good luck with that. Or you can really understand how people like to be involved. What are the things that motivate them? What are the things that activate them? What are the things that they do not enjoy doing and would prefer not to do? And how do you meet them there by offering them those opportunities of doing the things they want to do? So as an example, I've worked with many leaders in my career where many times they don't actually care what the strategy is. They just want to make sure that they're heard, that they have a chance to say what they think it should be, even though they'll go along with the rest of the team. So if you want to have dialogue with them and just tell them what the strategy is going to be, they're going to fight you tooth and nail. If you open it up and say, here's what I'm thinking, but Chris, I would love your thoughts on this. Like, what do you think about this? Where do you think this should go? Where do you think, this will have the most success? And I allow you to have that dialogue and say it. I say, you know what? I think that's a great idea. Let's build on that. Maybe we could do it this way. Maybe we could do it that way. The simple fact that I allowed you to voice your opinion and then went to build on it many times in the leader of that style, you'll say, cool, I was heard. I gave my points. It's built on that. I'm down for whatever with the team. So just as an example of, navigating with leaders of that level, I think that's something you have to be very conscious of if you're looking to accelerate the work that you need to get done.
Yeah, I think it was in our first dozen or so podcasts, we talked about the importance of, if you're a leader in the room, be the last one to speak. Because typically what happens is once you give your opinion as the leader, and this is assuming that you are the leader of the team that's in the room. These aren't your peers. These are people that report to you. Once you give your opinion, the likelihood of an opposing point of view to be interjected drops a little bit. If you have a great relationship, maybe they'll still say it, but there could be somebody in that room who doesn't want to challenge you just for the sheer sake of not challenging you. And so some really great ideas might end up not getting heard. So there's a lot of importance in being the last one to speak when you are the leader. When you have a group of peers in the room who all lead their teams and who all do a good job leading their teams, I think it changes a little bit, because on the one hand, each of those leaders is successful leading their teams in their way because of who they are. Meaning just trying to do what somebody else does, it might not make you a successful leader, because your people might not respond to it the way their people respond to them. And so people have developed these skills over a period of a long time in leading various teams. But obviously when you have a group of leaders who are peers in the same room together, no, not everybody's going to sit back and just say nothing. People will eventually speak up. And so if you know that a person is a very go with the flow kind of person, but they also want to be heard, then it should be your goal to not say something until after they've had their chance to talk, or to not interject, or to not kind of, control the room. But this is a kind of a little bit of a dance that has to be done here, because this isn't like doing the dishes where my wife was able to wash her hands, no pun intended, of the situation and walk away, and then I do the work by myself. You're talking about situations where several leaders have to collectively work together to get the job done. And if every person approaches the situation feeling like, if it's not being done my way, then it's not being done in the most efficient or the most likely to produce success way possible. If everybody feels that way, there's going to be some at least quiet animosity, if not really strong tension in that room.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, like when you're looking to influence people, you have to get your own ego out of the way. And that's something that it's like, what are you trying to achieve here? Are you trying to, get things done the way you want them done personally, or are you trying to get things done in a quick, consistent manner that gives you the output that you need to get? And the minute that you say it's about the best idea and it's about working together to get it to happen, you have to remove yourself out of that formula. And that can be really difficult to do in a lot of instances. And it does take, proactive, strategic thoughts of how you want to try to get the work done. I have many peers where I know that they don't want to get caught off guard or surprised with something that they haven't had time to think about. I know that there have been many peers that I've had where, they want to feel like there's maybe some alignment in the room before we even get to the room. So things that I will do is make the call ahead of time and reach out to somebody, say, hey, I know we're coming together tomorrow or next Tuesday or whatever the case is, and this is some of the agenda topics that we've all discussed. I want to get your thought on that now. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? Like, do you think that this is maybe what we want to do, or do you think maybe this is kind of the route we want to go? And you start to almost pre-game the time together, because some leaders, they don't like to get caught off guard, or they want time to take in the information, absorb it, consider it, be able to establish an opinion. So if you have those relationships with your peers, then it's important that you utilize them, and you realize that them feeling good about doing the work together is definitely more important than you saying this is how you want to do the work. I think another way to get that done is when you have a strategy that needs to happen or many facets to what you're trying to accomplish, is just simply ask who wants to own what. Hey, kind of here's the work. Here's the 4 buckets of things that need to get done. Here's kind of what I think. I think that some of you are naturally really good at some of these things, but I also want to make sure that you get an opportunity to do the work that you want to do. So who would like to own this and who would like to own that? And then allowing them to pick and choose what it is that they want to do is very helpful in saying, cool, everybody got what they want. Hey, I'll take whatever's left. Right? It's because I'm okay with that, because this is about the team. This is about us working together, and this is about us accomplishing a common goal. So I'm willing to be the last one to pick something if that helps us move all together in the same direction.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes the things that people are great at are things that just drain them. So you can't just assume that somebody will take on this particular element just because they're really good at it or because it's in their wheelhouse. Maybe they like these opportunities to stretch themselves or take on things that they don't have a lot of experience with, but that would, drive them or make them more passionate about the work. So I completely agree with that. I really like what you said about the motivation behind what you're trying to get done. And I'll give you an example that I see all the time. When you watch politicians on TV, and this is something that happens on both the left and the right, there's not one side owns this. There are plenty of news organizations that will find clips of politicians saying one thing or supporting one thing depending on who's in office, and then when it changes, they will be against the exact same thing or vice versa. And you see this kind of trend of people who, it's like if they supported something because they thought it was a good idea, but then as soon as the other team is the one in power, they no longer support it. And it's not because they don't like the idea. It's a good idea. It's because they don't want to see that team get the perceived win. They want to be the ones to bring the win home, not let somebody else do it. And it drives me insane when I see that happening. And you see it, it's a constant thing no matter who's in office now. But leadership can happen in the same way when it comes to leaders. If your goal is to actually get the job done and get the win for the team, or to have the team succeed as a whole, how you approach this is significantly different than if you just want to be the one who is known to have influenced the process or be the one to make that win happen. If you don't care who gets the credit, if you don't care how the win gets there as long as everybody succeeds, that can really change the trajectory of how you approach this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a big chunk of this, is that if you're really truly trying to influence people and meet them where they're at, you have to put what is the goal that you're trying to achieve ahead of how the work gets done. And again, that's removing yourself out of the formula. I think when it comes to leading people, it is a little bit different. As you mentioned earlier, there's intent behind being the leader of a team and being the leader in the room, because there will be the natural default to want to have you answer the question first, or you say something, because then it becomes the easy game of just agree with the highest ranking official in the room.
Sure.
Nobody wants, right? And so it takes time to deconstruct that and to not have that happen, so that the best idea can win and not either the highest ranking or the loudest voice. But I think it's just as imperative when it comes to teams that you have. What triggered this thought was when you said just because somebody is good at something doesn't mean they want to do it.
Right.
And as soon as you said that, I immediately thought of the amount of times when I have told somebody to take notes, right?
Right.
Like, oh, hey, Chris will take notes because he's really good at it. And then you just look at me like, I want to kill you. But you take the notes because you're like, I am really good at this. And they're good. People appreciate it. But at the end of the day, like, that's not necessarily helping to a degree. And I know it's something very simple, but I think it's important to know what those things are from the people that report to you. It's very important to know what are the things that, again, like, what is everybody good at, but also like, what are the things that they may be good at, but also drain them? What are the things that, that they're not that great at, but that they find energy in? And how can you help them in those situations? And I think if you're trying to influence people to make work happen in a more effective or efficient way, you really have to meet them in that space of understanding how it is that they want to do the work and allowing them to do the work that way.
Yeah, I think this extends to more than just there's a particular thing that has to get done. It doesn't have to be project based, meaning influence happens when it comes to relationships as a whole, even if there isn't a specific thing of work that has to get done. And so I've had situations where there was a rift between someone else and myself. And in my heart of hearts, I felt like I was right and they were wrong. But the relationship was more important to me than being right. And so I owned the failure when I didn't, in my heart of hearts, feel like it was all my failure, that it was a mutual thing, but there was no way they were going to own any of it. And I made the conscious decision that it was more important to move forward and make sure the relationship was stronger. That to me, that's the same thing. It's meeting people on their terms. They were unspoken terms, but it was clear the terms they were so incredibly passionate about how we had gotten to this state that there was no budging. And I could have held my ground too, and then that would have been fine. And then the relationship would have dissolved and we would have moved forward. And I don't know if it's, it wasn't altruism. I found value in the relationship from a professional standpoint. I wanted to have that relationship be strong. And so there was an element of meeting that person on their terms in order to make sure that I still had the influence of that relationship. And so I think that if you're listening to this isn't as simple as just, oh, you're in a room with a group of people trying to divide up work or trying to get a project done. This happens all the time, every day, even if you're not trying to get a specific project done.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And I like kind of the idea, again, I've heard before people say like you can either be right or you can be happy. And it's similar to this, is that, you can continually stand on the hill of saying like, well, I want it done this way. And there are like, the only time that is something that you should stand up for and push and fight for is when it is a very clear process that's necessary from a legal standpoint or a safety standpoint or an ethics standpoint, where something is like, this is not even about me and my opinion. It just has to be this way for this very specific reason. Other than that, it doesn't really matter how it's done. Yes, could it be done more efficiently? Absolutely. Could it be done more effectively? Yes. But you're actually not helping to develop anybody if you're micromanaging them or telling them exactly how to do it. You need to give them a little bit of space to go and try it their way, support them with that, and then ask the questions that walk them down the path of what could they have done differently if you were trying to get a different result, like a better speed or a higher quality of output.
I completely agree. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, so for this 1 minute hack, here's what I'd like for you to do. Get out your pen and paper, and at the top on the left-hand side, I want you to write the word outcome. In the top right-hand side, I want you to write the word opinion. And the next time that you have to have dialogue with a peer of yours or a direct report or somebody where you're trying to get some work done and you know that you have to influence them to get the work done collectively, I want you to write down underneath the word outcome, what is the outcome that you're actually trying to achieve? And then under the opinion category, I want you to write down what is your opinion on how the work should be done. And I want you to write that down before you have the dialogue with them, so that when you walk into the conversation or you walk into the meeting, you can think about ahead of time what it is that you're trying to achieve, and you can prioritize the outcome over your opinion. What this will do is when you're having the conversation, if you find yourself at any point saying out loud the things that are under the opinion category, then you may be in a lost space. You may be starting to shift towards your opinion, meaning more than the outcome, and that could be some place where you're going to have a lot of pushback in regards to your type of influence. Now, you may be asked what your opinion is, and you may be able to give it, but it has to be under the right context to make sure that you're not over-influencing your way of doing things and then walking into a path where you're going to get a lot of resistance.
I think it's a great 1 minute hack. I think advice that is solicited, if they are asking you for what your opinion is, not from a standpoint of placating you, like, oh, that's fine, I'll do this, but he's going to want me to ask what his opinion is, so that's we get there anyway. As long as it's not from that standpoint, then I think if it's solicited from a standpoint of, hey, Lorenzo's been around the block for a few times, I kind of would really like to know how he would handle this situation, then I think that's a smart way to go about it. But be very careful about making sure that you're not setting up the conversation so that the person feels like they have to ask for your opinion so that you can interject it anyway. I think that the problems here arise when people bleed the lines between the outcome and the opinion. and they become fixated on that the outcome they're looking for is to have their direction followed, as opposed to whatever the team goal is. So I think it's a great 1 minute hack.
Thank you. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.